everyone. I am Kathleen Watkins of Outlive Your Life, the workshop where you learn to write your life story 2 pages at a time. In each episode, I will talk with individuals who have experienced a guided autobiography class. They will share one of their stories with you, the listening audience, and receive supportive feedback. Each of us is unique. There has never been anyone exactly like you. One of the greatest risks we face in life is living day to day without any reflection of who we are, what we've done, where we've been, and what really matters to us. Guided autobiography was developed by James Buren, a professor of gerontology at USC in the 1970s. It is a system that recaptures our lives by writing our stories 2 pages at a time, sharing these stories in a group setting, receiving and giving feedback, and preserving our life stories for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations to come. Today, on our second episode, I am so happy to have one of the ladies who participated in my very first class, Carolyn Stampley. And we also have with us today Jasmine, who is the producer of this great podcast. Carolyn, would you please share with the audience, just tell us something about you.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. A little bit about myself is I'm a mother of 3 adult children, and I also have 3 grandchildren. I am a part of Toastmasters, a former member of Toastmasters, actually, but while I was in Toastmasters, they named me, or they started calling me, the storyteller. And at first, I didn't wear that badge very well because I didn't think I was. But when I realized that people were remembering my stories, that's when I took on, maybe I am a storyteller. So now I wear that badge very proudly of being a storyteller. I'm also a part of Spiritually Bold Incorporated, one of Kathleen's groups. She let me be one of the actors in several of her plays, and she let me be a singer. She wrote in a spot where I could sing. That was one of my greatest joys of Spiritually Bold Incorporated. And I'm also adventurous. So I tell people I jumped out of an airplane, and they, to me at this point it's not a great big thing, but at the time it was happening, it's quite dramatic, and I'm glad I did it in my life, jumped out of a plane, and I would love to do it again. And I am a part of the Regatta Festival. I do dragon boat racing. So every season I try to get in there and race on the Oklahoma River. And last but not least, I am the secretary at Oklahoma Student Loan Authority, OSLA. That's who I am. And like Kathleen said, my name is Carolyn Stampley. So.
Oh, Carolyn, you are quite an interesting person. She's not kidding. When she first came to Toastmasters, we started calling her the storyteller because she has such a she just has such a way of telling stories that just grabs your attention. So, Carolyn, when I ask you to be a part of my workshop, you didn't hesitate to say yes. Why?
Well, I like writing. And that's why it's interesting to me, because I wanted to let my family know also. I want my family to know what has happened in my life, and to be able to share that story in writing. That's why I was interested. I did hesitate a little bit because I was like, oh, what are you trying to get me into now? And how long is this going to take me? And what am I going to have to do? But the thing that really sold me when you asked me about being a part of your class is when you said, all you have to write is 2 pages. And that's when I thought, I can do that. I can write 2 pages and excuse me, share what I really want to share. I think in 2 pages, and it won't take up so much of my time. That's why I wanted to be a part of the class.
I think that that's one of the best parts about it because most people, when they think of writing their life story, they think they've got to write this whole big narrative and they have to start from the very beginning. They have to do it chronologically. Wherein with guided autobiography, you are given a theme every week to write on. And these are universal themes. For instance, the first one I usually do is turning points. What is a turning point in your life? It is where was the time when something happened to you that kind of turned you around? It could have been a person who did that for you. It could have been an event. It could have been you just reading a book. And it just kind of turned you all the way around. So, Carolyn, what I would like to do right now, because I want the audience to really get a good idea of what these classes are all about, we're going to really demonstrate what a guided autobiography class is all about. So would you please read your story? Now, is this going to be a turning point story?
This is the turning point story.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, it's yours.
Okay. The name of my story is Turning Point, I Was Still a Child. There is a singer named Adele. She just came out with a new song that's so beautiful and soulful. The name of the song is Go Easy on Me. She probably was singing about a love of hers, but some of the words are so fitting at this time for me as I think of turning points and writing starting from the beginning. This major turning point can never be left out of my story. Adele's words say, I was still a child. It didn't get a chance to feel the world around me. I had no time to choose what I chose to do, so go easy on me. So I start with, I was still a child when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. The thing is, I didn't know at the time what all that meant. I was still a child. I remember she got sick a few times and had to go to the hospital. I think people tried to shelter me and my 4 sisters from what was happening to my mother. Now that I look back, a couple of my aunts from Texas came to stay with us a while. Maybe it was to help my mom with us, or maybe it was just to get them away from their own drama in Texas. I don't know. I was still a child. What I do know is one time my mom came home from the hospital and she had so many bandages on one side of her chest and she seemed to be in pain. I don't know why out of all my sisters, I seemed to hang around my mom the most at this time. I watched over her, not consciously. I was still a child. I didn't know how to choose what I chose to do. I just knew I needed to be close to her. I remember when she went to the bathroom to remove the bandages. I was right there. She started removing the gauze one at a time, layer after layer. Tears began to run down her cheeks as the last layer revealed a horrible scar. One of her breasts had been cut off. I was still a child. I had no time to choose what I chose to do, and I chose to stay close, very close to her, and watch her and help her with anything she needed to clean and redress the scars and get back in bed to rest. This happened for many days. The scar began to heal and close, and she seemed to get better. We were almost back to life as usual, almost back to normal. Mom used to get us ready on Saturdays for church on Sunday. All 5 of us girls had to get our hair done. Before Mom got sick, she would do our hair. Now we had to go to the hairdresser. The hairdresser pressed our hair so hard and with so much grease. When it was time to walk back home in the hot sun, our heads were still burning and sizzling. Sundays at church were always great because we got to see Reverend Carson and listen to him preach. I was still a child, though. I twisted around in my seat wanting him to hurry up and finish preaching just like any other child. At the end, he always sang a song and had an altar call. Now I noticed Mom. She again had tears running down her cheeks. I was still a child, but I was wondering now, was she praying? Was she asking God for help? Was she asking God to heal her? Was she praying that we would be okay if she wasn't going to make it? I remember she had a rosary. We were a part of the AME Zion Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. They must have broken off from the Catholic Church. I don't know, I was still a child and I didn't get a chance to choose, but sometimes I noticed my mom with that rosary. One day the ambulance came to the house. Mom wasn't feeling good. They took her to the hospital. I was still a child and I didn't understand for 1 minute the severity of her sickness and that she might not come back home. I don't remember if it was the day after they took her away to the hospital or many days. I was still a child, and all I know is one day my dad gathered us all around him, and Reverend Carson was there, and my dad told us that Mom was sick, and he said she called out all of our names, Evelyn, Debbie, Carolyn, Linda, and Pam, and then she passed away. She died, and my dad began to cry out in sorrow. We all began to cry. I don't know if we were crying because Mom had died or because Dad was crying and we had never seen him cry before. The next day, the sun came up. I could see the daylight through my bedroom window, but nobody was moving in the house. I remember we all just laid there in the silence. Adele mentioned in her song, "Can't Bring Myself to Swim," drowning in the silence. She mentions, I had good intentions, I had hopes. My mom died at the age of 36. All the dreams, all the hopes seemed to have slipped away. She wouldn't be there to see her children graduate high school, get a college degree, fall in love, prepare for weddings, see her first grandchild, watch us fall and struggle, watch us get up and succeed, watch us become so much like her, patient and kind. So this is what I really want to say in my story with Adele's words. Go easy on me. I was still a child, didn't get the chance to feel the world around me. I had no time to choose what I chose to do, so go easy on me. A part of my heart has been taken away. Go easy on me. That's my story.
Yeah, and that's really heart-wrenching. And even though I have heard the story before, it still is. And the line that always gets me is when you say, "But I was just a child. I was just a child." Jazz, what jumped out at you?
That story was beautifully written. I want to say that first. And
Thank you.
it was so moving to hear how deeply personal that moment was for you in life and that span of time in life for you. And I also really appreciate how you are able to listen to music and express the way that you feel about recalling these moments in song. Because for me, that is deep down a way that I process things in life. All of my happy moments, all of my sad moments, it always seems like there ends up being a song that just perfectly encapsulates that moment. And I also just want to say thank you for sharing that story, because I've had family that's had sickness too, and it it helps me feel like we're not alone in these struggles when we get to hear other people's stories.
Thank you.
You are so right about that, Jazz. We are not alone. So, Carolyn, share with us your experience in going back and bringing back that memory, writing about it.
Oh, it was so emotional writing this story. I have written about my mother before, and just having to put it in 2 pages kind of simplified it a little bit. But when I heard Adele's song, it started pulling at my heart. It started pulling at my heart. Oh yeah, you were just a child when this was going on. I hadn't, I realized it, but it's like when she was singing, I was like, I was still a child, and this is what I saw. This is what happened in my life, and to get that story out, it was very, very emotional for me. But the joy of writing this story for me was when I started sharing it with my family. And my sisters, they began to ask me questions like, Carolyn, I knew what we were going through, but I didn't realize that what what I had seen. They didn't realize what I had seen. And when I shared that with them, it became a very emotional and, again, a very personal story, a very personal part of our life. The other side of that is when I shared it with my grandchildren. One of my granddaughters is 17 years old, the other one's 15. And when I shared with them, they never got a chance to meet their great grandmother. And my granddaughter said, after I read the story, she said, wait a minute, who is this you're reading about? And I'm like, this was my mother, which would be your great grandmother. And she just broke out in tears. So to me, it's like I had introduced her to her great grandmother, and then she realized I have lost my great grandmother, and this is how I lost her. So it was very emotional, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to write this story.
I am too. I'm always amazed at how these stories affect not only the writer but also the other participants in the class. Because what happens is while we're listening, our mind goes back to a time, and what memory was triggered in me was when my grandmother passed. I was only 11, and I have not realized just until recently how that really affected me. I never really even got into it, but when I began to write, I had to do these write on these turning points as well. Then I wrote about that. So, Carolyn, tell me, what are your overall thoughts about guided autobiography?
Oh my!
And would you recommend it to others?
My overall thoughts is, please do this. Please do this for your family and for your friends, not just for after you've passed away, but share your stories with your family now. Because after you pass away, you won't be able to see their emotions. You won't be able to answer the questions that come afterwards. If you share your story, write these stories with Kathleen now, and then go back and share them with your friends. Yes, I would recommend. I would highly, highly, highly recommend anybody, whether you're young or old, start writing your stories that it can live, so that you can live on past your time.
Good point, Carolyn. I was just going to say that. That's why I call my workshop Outlive Your Life. Because once we are gone, if we have documented our stories, then our life really lives on. Most of the books that we read, a lot of them are from people who are already gone. And they continue to inspire and encourage us. To be honest, this world is run by dead people who really made laws, Yeah, and we are still living according to that. So you want to document it, and you made a good point where if you do it now and share it with your family, then you'll get a chance to see their reaction. And like your granddaughters, you had a chance to see the look on their faces,
right,
and see, how they felt.
It was such a precious moment, to catch her reaction. I'm like, please share your stories.
It doesn't get any better than that. Jazz, is it something you want to say?
I just love the idea of continuing somebody's legacy through story. That got me thinking about how my siblings and I like to remember our father. He had passed away in 2015. And for us, there was a time where we were grieving that, of course, and recovering and growing from what happened. But now, whenever we want to remember him, I'll just kind of nudge my brother on the arm and be like, hey, you remember that one time? Mm-hmm. And it's like he's right there with us all over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing, too, as a guided autobiography instructor, I can remember when I first started writing plays. I write plays about my ancestors. I tell their story. And one thing that really jumped out at me while I did my research was that there wasn't very much material on that person from that person. And if I could have just known what their thoughts were, it would have made it so much easier for me to write their story. But I'm, having to get information from other sources. And also, another event that happened was that my granddaughter, she was taking an African American studies class, and she called me one day and said, Grandma, we're doing a project on the family. Do you have any information for me? Oh my God, I didn't have anything for her. And nothing of substance. I had a lot of pictures, but she wanted stories, and I didn't have any of this. But you know what it did? It sent me on a mission. I started gathering information, writing these stories, and now they have a treasure trove of information. I do believe that this is my calling. I truly do. And I'm so glad that you were a part of the class. Now, Carolyn, I'm going to ask a bonus question before we close. Okay. And that bonus question is, if you could have lunch with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be? From your family.
Oh, from my family? Mm-hmm. Well, when you first start asking that question, I've had people ask me that question before, and I always go back to a biblical character. Oh, okay. Yes, I would like to see Jesus. Okay. I got lots of questions to ask God when I get there. Okay. But that's from good. From my family, I would say I would love to meet my grandmothers. I had a step-grandmother, and she was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to me, but I've never met my real grandmothers, and I remember going to the funeral of my dad's mother, but I don't remember ever really meeting her. And it has been my greatest joy. It was my great joy to be a mother, but when you become a grandmother, it's elevated. It's an elevated joy. And I would love to see my grandmother. I would love to look into their eyes and just see the love. And I want to see, do they look like me? Do I look like my grandmother? Do I see myself when I see her? So I want to see my grandmothers. And even as Jazz was saying, the perception of their story. What would my grandmother say about my parents? Do you remember when? I remember when my son, which would have been my father, or what stories would she have to say about my parents? Or would she say, you are just like your dad, or you are just like your mother? That's who I want to one day meet, the grandparents.
That is wonderful. That really is. Jazz, who would you like to have lunch with if you had a choice?
That's a great question. I think if I could have lunch with anyone, it would be my late maternal grandfather. He passed about 16 years ago, and I would love more than anything in the world to show him how much the world has changed since then, and how much I've grown and my siblings have grown and how much the family has grown, and what a joy it would be to see what he thought of the world as it keeps turning.
Yeah. That's good. If I could have lunch with anyone, it would be my father, because I never got to know him. My first question would be, where have you been? But yeah.
All my life.
Yeah, all my life. But it would just be nice. I wish I had gotten to know him. I wish I knew that side of the family, because I would want to know, it's like you were saying, where did I get this from? Where did I get that from? Because like you're saying, you can look at certain members of your family, because I tell my nieces, girl, you are just like your mama. Just little things like that. So it would definitely be my father. Well, ladies, it has been wonderful talking to you and hearing your story, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Wonder what a legacy to leave behind. Well, with that, I'm going to close this episode by sharing with the audience, your story is the most important part of who you are. The struggles, failures, and successes, and everything else in between. Start documenting your life story and outlive your life. Outlive Your Life is a part of the Breaking Ice Building Bridges community podcast platform, brought to you by Possibilities.